Nice haircut. You look good. You look good. It's nice to see so many people here. It was awesome. You guys are a testament to this practice. It's an amazing thing. All these people coming together to grow spiritually and bring a little peace to their lives. So as I said, I've been doing a series of talks on the 5 hindrances. It's going to be the 5 hindrances to awakening, or really they're just hindrances to life in general. And I've been running through all of them. I did a brief an overview talk at the beginning, and then I've run through each of them individually. And this is kind of the culmination of that. Tonight I'm going to talk about the last hindrance, which is the hindrance of doubt. And doubt can show up in a few different ways. And I'm going to address all of those. The first one is doubt in the practice itself. Doubt's really like the most insidious of all of the hindrances, because it will stop you in your tracks before you ever start. Especially if you don't have a modicum of faith in this practice. And when I say faith, I don't mean blind faith. I mean experiential faith. This is one of those things that if you do it, you know it works. And if you're all here, you must see something in it. So congratulations to yourselves for just showing up for yourselves. So does this path work? Well, yes, absolutely, 100% it works. I don't think it would have been around for 25 centuries if it didn't have a bit of efficacy to it, right? Continuous practice for 25 centuries. Seems like a pretty solid path. There's actually a story from the Buddha's life about this kind of a question. So he was living in Savatthi, which was the capital of Kosala, and he was teaching in a meditation center, giving Dharma talks and doing things, much like I'm doing here right now. And there was monks and nuns and lay people, householders, such as ourselves, and they showed up in droves to listen to the Buddha and learn his teachings and learn this path and listen to his Dharma talks. And a lot of people would just, a lot of people from the city would just show up to hear his Dharma talks because, the Buddha was a pretty charismatic guy and seemed to have his stuff together pretty well. So one regular attendee, he happened to find the Buddha alone one day. Lucky for him, because he had been wanting to ask the Buddha a question. So he took this opportunity to finally ask him this question. And he said, he wanted to ask him when he was alone, when nobody else was around, because it was about the efficacy of this path. He said, he needed some clarification over some confusion that he was having. And the Buddha said, sure, I'd be happy to clarify anything, because there shouldn't be any confusion as to these teachings. So he said, I've been coming here for years, and I've seen fully liberated people. I've seen people who are what seem half liberated. And then I've seen people that show up that there doesn't seem to be any discernible change in them whatsoever. And he said, but you're the Buddha, right? You're this all-powerful, enlightened being. If they come to you, how come all of these people don't reach liberation? And the Buddha had different ways of dealing with people, different students, different people that had questions, just depending on the person. And so with this particular person, he started a line of counter-questioning, which was one of the Buddha's biggest go-tos, was this counter-questioning. He would answer questions with questions. And so when he asked him, why aren't all these people liberated? The Buddha says, well, where are you from? And he says, well, I'm from here in Kosala. And the Buddha says, I can tell just by your face, by your features, that you're not from here originally, right? You immigrated from somewhere. You came from somewhere else. And he said, that's actually true. I did come from somewhere else. A few years ago, I moved here from Rangjani. And he says, well, since you've been here, have you cut all ties with Rangjani? And he says, no, my family's still there. I still have friends there. My business is there. I go there several times a year. He said, okay, well, since you still travel there many times a year, you must be aware of the path to get there, right? I said, yeah, of course. Absolutely. I travel it frequently. I go there frequently. My family's there. My business is there. My friends are there. He said, well, since you've been here, since you've been in Kosali, have you met anyone? Have you made friends here? Do you have any close friends that you've made? Any people that you've grown close to? He said, oh yeah, I've made tons of friends. I have lots of friends. And he said, and they know you're from Rajani, right? He said, oh, of course. He said, so you must have people that ask you how to get there. He said, yeah, I have people ask me that all the time. He says, and do you keep it a secret from them? He says, no, I give them in great detail the directions to get there. He said, you go this way, and then you take a left, and then you pass through Varanasi, and you take a right, and you take a left, and I give them fine details on how to get there. He says, okay. So all these people that you give these details to, all these fine details of how to get there, this path to Ranjanish, did they arrive there? He says, well, no, sir, obviously not. If they never start the path, how can they ever get there? As well, it's a good question. So I think the point of the story is if you don't start the path, you're not going to get to your destination. I can give you all the directions in the world on how to get to liberation. But unless you take the first steps, you're never going to get there. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Whether it's 1 step, 10 steps, 100 steps, or all the steps, are you on the path? Are you actually walking the path? Because we can gain wisdom through hearing talks like this or reading, which is called Suttamaya Panya, Panya being wisdom. The Suttamaya Panya is wisdom from hearing other people's accounts or hearing Dharma talks, reading books about this path. There's Sintamaya Panya, which is the analytical, intellectual experience when we see other people benefiting from the path. And then there's Bhavanamaya Panya, which is wisdom from personal experience. Here's a good analogy for that. Say you go to a restaurant, right? And you're reading the menu and you're like, this food looks amazing. This all looks very delicious. And then you see other people enjoying the food. And you're like, oh, it must be very good. But you don't really know that the food is good until you taste the food. It's impossible to know how good the food is until you've actually experienced it. It doesn't matter how much you read the menu, how much other people appear to be enjoying it. Until you actually taste the food, you're not going to enjoy the food. You're not going to know how good the food is without tasting it. So this is a process of personal experience. You can come to this group and you can read books on this path and you can do all these things, but unless you start on the path, unless you make a commitment to the path, you just won't get the benefits from it. You won't reach liberation. It's impossible. Especially, and one thing I'd like to point out is, and for many years I did this, I took bits and pieces from different spiritual paths and kind of made like a spiritual goulash hodgepodge, right? Just whatever I felt like, ooh, maybe a little of this and a little of that and a little of this, and kind of we'll mix it all up and see how it works. And that shit's a dead end. I'm going to tell you right now. I don't care what your path is. It can be this path. It can be another path. But pick one and stick to it. Because that's the only way any of this stuff works, is by committing to one path. As long as you're bouncing around, you're never going to get to the destination. So the second way we can doubt this path is doubt in the teacher, right? I might be full of shit, right? You have no idea if I'm completely full of shit or not. I assume you all don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. I have put a lot of effort into actually walking this path. I just got out of a 10-day silent meditation retreat where I sat in silent meditation, not opening my eyes, hands, or legs for roughly 120 hours over the course of 10 days. If that doesn't show commitment to my walking the path, I don't know what does. It's a lot of noble silence. It's 240 hours of noble silence.
3 days, that was tough.
Yeah, 10 days was it was rough. And that what's called the Vipassana vendetta shows up really early, where you start getting these aversions to other people just from the shit they do. People slamming doors and you can't say anything to them about it. People taking a lot of food before other people have even eaten in the mess hall, and just minor shit. But the minor shit shows up, and it'll drive you crazy, especially in that noble silence, and you can't say anything. But yeah, it starts driving you a little crazy. So yeah, you may have doubt in the teacher. So find a good teacher. I'd like to think that I'm a decent teacher. I am working my best at being the best teacher that I can be, but that's another way that doubt can show up. And the third way that doubt can show up is just doubt in yourself. Doubt in your commitment to the path. Doubt, can I do this? Can I commit to this path? And that's really a personal question. Like, are you willing to commit to the path? Are you willing to do the work? This is the 8-fold path, not the 4 3/4-fold path. Like, you can't just do half of it and like phone it in on the weekends. Like, you have to commit to it, This is a path of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Sila being our ethics. Are our ethics in line? We look at our speech and our actions, and the way we make our living. Are they in line with the path? Are they in line with the Dharma? Are they in line with the natural order of things? Because if they're not in line with the natural order of things, nature will show up and it will take you out. Nature doesn't play. And this is the natural law. The Dharma is just the natural law. If you do good things will come to you. If you do bad things will come to you. The first verse of the Dhammapada is, mind precedes all. All suffering is mind-made. And that doesn't just mean like we create all suffering in our mind. But all suffering is created in the mind in the sense that before speech, before action, there comes thought. So there's this volition before we speak. There's volition before we act. It all is created within mind. So if your mind isn't in line, if you speak and act with an impure mind, suffering will follow you like the foot of the ox followed the wheel. So we start with our ethics. We make sure that our ethics are tight so we're not creating any additional layers of suffering. We take, as lay practitioners, we take on 5 precepts. We commit to not killing any living thing. We commit to not taking what's not freely given. We commit to not saying any harmful, slanderous speech or lying. We commit to no sexual misconduct. We commit to not taking any substances that lead to heedlessness, right? And that's the big one, is the one that leads to heedlessness. Any substance that leads to heedlessness, if you go out and get drunk. There's a story about, I've got a good story about this. There's a monk and he's given the option, he has to break one of the precepts or he has to leave the monastery, right? And he says, well, I can't kill anyone. I obviously can't kill anyone because that would be wrong. He said, well, I can't steal from someone because that also would harm somebody else. I'm not going to lie to people because that too would cause harm to other people. And sexual misconduct, well, that's out of the question. So really the only thing I can do is break the last precept. So he ended up getting shit-faced drunk and then broke all the other precepts, right? Because that's the way it works, Heedlessness. No substances that lead to heedlessness. And that's up to you to decide what leads to heedlessness for you. And it's not for me to decide. This isn't Narcotics Anonymous. This is not Alcoholics Anonymous. This is for you to decide. If you smoke weed and it works for you, then do that. I don't give a shit. It's your life. I'm not here to tell you how to live. I'm here to tell you, for you to figure out how to live. You have all the answers. They're all within you. I don't have any of the answers. I can point you in the direction, but it's up to you to walk the path, right? So like I said, our sila is our first step in the cessation of suffering. If we get our ethics in line, we stop creating additional layers of suffering, mental reactions, what are referred to as sankhara. Because most of our suffering comes from this sankhara. We react to situations. We cling to things, we crave things, we're averse to things, and these micro cravings and these micro aversions show up time and time again. And unless we're able to get those in check and stop creating new sankhara, then the old sankhara continue to multiply. But if we stop creating new negative sankhara, the old ones begin to fall away. And this is the path of purification. This is how we purify the mind. This is the path of liberation. This is what Gautama taught. This is exactly what he taught, is to pay attention to the sensations. So maybe you may have heard me talk about Vedana or feeling tone. So when we experience things by objects coming in through the sense doors, correctly? And within the framework of the Dharma, the sense doors are all 5 of our normal faculties of sense smell, taste, touch, hearing, sight, plus mind. Mind is also included as a sense door. So objects come to the sense door, they hit the sense doors and create consciousness. And that can be eye consciousness, nose consciousness, mind consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness, touch consciousness. From that, we perceive things, and then our perception gives rise to the way we view things. I can show you a picture, and if I held up a picture of, probably not in here, but I was going to use Donald Trump as a example. That's probably not a good one. But I can hold up a picture of something, and everybody's going to have a different perception of it. And then that's going to create this Vedana, this feeling tone, the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral aspect of that. And whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral shows us how our sankharas are created, how we react, our mental reaction. If it's pleasant, it's the human tendency to cling to the pleasurable. If it's unpleasant, it's the human tendency to push away from pain. You know those, like when you're sitting there and you get that little itch while you're meditating, you're like, I just have to scratch it. It's those little micro aversions. So when we sit, it's important to sit as still as possible. It's important to let these sensations arrive. It's important to let them arise, and so we can let them pass away. The more we are able to sit with our feelings and our sensations throughout the body and our thoughts equanimously, just witness them and let them arise and let them pass away without intervention, but just noticing them, observing them, and just letting them pass away. The more we're able to let go of these old sankharas, the more they just fall away. And as I said, this is the way, this is the path of liberation. This is what Siddhartha Gautama taught. This is it.
Question.
Yes.
So generally Buddhism preaches nonviolence.
Correct.
But Buddhism also has Shaolin monks, which is often very violent at times. I'm personally in mixed martial arts, which can be violent. And then if I look in nature, essentially every mammal on the planet engages in some form of, unarmed ritual combat of some sort. You see lions fight with one another, and that's how they learn to defend themselves in the wild.
Right, but lions don't drive cars.
Lions do not drive cars.
We have higher function, and we can decide to act with violence or not. Lions have to survive. We have a choice, and I think that's what it comes down to. You do you. I'm not saying. That's a question that I'm not really at liberty to answer. And from a Buddhist perspective, any form of aggression. I mean, I'm not totally familiar with Shaolin monks because I teach Theravada Buddhism. I teach Pali-Canon Buddhism. That's what I teach is the Dharma. I don't know. That's a fine question. I can tell you what one of my teachers would say is that any act of aggression or violence is not acceptable. And he's a Vietnam veteran that's killed many, many people and is now a Zen monk and has been for many years. And he's part of the Zen Peacekeepers Foundation, and his whole commitment is to nonviolence. And he would say that any aggression is violence.
I would never exhibit violence on a non-willing participant.
I think if it's mutual combat.
Pedestrian world, but in a situation like that, you're both, you know what you're walking into, and then from my perspective, the real thing that I'm fighting against is myself.
Right. I think that's a war to be fought inside and not externally.
And so I guess if I'm honest about it, part of my motivation is I do it because I'm afraid. And in my experience, most of the things I'm afraid of, if I walk straight into them, that fear seems to dissipate.
And generally. Like I said, that's something you're going to have to work out.
And I've also just been involved in martial arts my whole life. But I was just curious what your insight was on that.
Like I said, I feel like if it's a mutual combat thing, if it's a sporting thing, sure, go for it. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
But I think if you're street brawling, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. So I think you're good. I think you're safe. I think you're basically just playing tennis, but like doing it in a more aggressive way. That's basically what I'm hearing. So I think you're fine.
I was just curious what your perspective would be.
Yeah, I think you're good to go, man. I've got I used to practice martial arts, and I don't anymore, but yeah, I think you're fine. I think you're okay.
I'm not allowed to train right now for some medical issues I got going on right now, but
Well, you're training the mind. You're training the mind. So.
yes, I'll slow down and take some time. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, this is the path, man. This is the path to liberation. This is the path of purification of mind and spirit. This is the path to true happiness and wisdom. And that's wisdom that we arrive to through our own experience. This Bhavana Maya Panya. It's by sitting here, observing the breath, observing the sensations of the body, watching them arise, watching them pass away, knowing that they're impermanent, and knowing that all things are impermanent, knowing that we are impermanent, knowing that the body and the mind are constantly changing. At a cellular level, we're always changing. None of us are the same people we were when we even walked in this room. You've heard things through this talk that have changed your mind in some way, probably. You've heard some new words, some new concepts. We're not the same. There's no static self. There's no I, no me, no mine. It's the impersonal nature of existence. But we all suffer the same. We all suffer loss. We all suffer sickness. We all suffer aging. We're all going to die. We all experience praise and blame, loss and gain, fame and shame, pleasure and pain. These are human things that we all experience. And we all generate sankhara dukkha, the suffering of our own mind, the stories that we create for ourselves. Most of our suffering is mind-made. If we can just be with our own suffering, that goes a long way.